Alright folks, welcome to Stu's Garage. Today we're going to be working on a 2020 brand new M8 competition. Folks, this is the fastest, most powerful production BMW ever made, and somebody's letting me get my grubby hands on it here in Stu's Garage. What we're doing today is going to be putting some lowering springs on it, and I'm going to be taking you through the DIY. But before we get into that, I know this is a suspension install, but we just have to take a minute just to take in the beauty of this car. This is an awesome machine right here. Alright folks, I know this is a suspension DIY, but we just have to take a minute out to just admire the beauty of this car. This is a brand new M8 competition 2020 M8 competition Gran Coupe, and it's in my favorite color, of course. Could be a little bit darker, but I love gray cars. This is such a beautiful car. One of the differences between the M8 Gran Coupe and the M8 regular coupe is they finally figured out how to incorporate that ducktail, so the trunk is really beautiful. One thing that they got away from to differentiate this from the 6 Series is all of the 6 Series cars have that retractable button right here, but the contours and the shape of this car is just magnificent. It's amazing. I am a two-door car fan all day. I love cars that are two doors. I hate when they make four-door versions of two-door cars, but this one is absolutely beautiful. And if I was going to buy an M8, it would definitely be the four-door version, because this car is just so awesome. But enough of me gushing over the car. We're going to go ahead and get along with this install. Alright folks, so this is what we're working with today. We've got the H&R spring kit. This is actually a spring kit for a BMW 550 M Sport all-wheel drive, whatever the comparable generation to this car is. I'll just put a title down below to tell you what chassis code that is. They don't actually make a suspension for the new M8 yet because it's too new. So apparently this will be the 4th car with this particular suspension on it. Other people have done it in the past. There are no DIYs anywhere else on the internet at the time that I'm doing this video. So I'm going to be the first person doing a DIY for doing any kind of suspension work on the M8/M5 all-wheel drive cars. So normally I'll look at a DIY and I'll try to piece it together, and then I'll come out with a better one that has more details. This one, I'm flying completely blind, folks. I've done a lot of suspensions on a lot of cars in the past, more than I can even remember. I've designed and built my own suspensions. This is still going to be a little bit different than anything I've ever worked on, and so it's going to put my skills to the test. But that's what we're here for on Premium Fuel Mag, is to show you what I've learned and help you to do it better. So here we go. Alright, first things first, we're under the hood. We got to remove this cover, and it's just a little locking tab right here. Get that guy out of the way. The thing we're going to do is we have to start removing some of this weather stripping, and what that's held in by is these 2 little removable pins. I've already popped one out. We got to pop the other one out here, and then we can actually pull this weather stripping out of the way. Actually, the last thing you're going to have to do before you do that, we'll just go ahead and do that now. So we're going to pull the boot off of this shock. And we're going to unplug this guy from down here. These should just pull off. Alright, so to finish pulling this trim apart, this guy just pops out. It takes more force than you think, but it will pop out. Same goes with the plug here. It takes a little bit more force than what you're going to be comfortable with, but it does pop right out if you pull on it. Now we can pull this trim out of the way and put that elsewhere. And just like you would see on any other car, we've got 3 bolts up top. But before we go ahead and unbolt those, we're going to come down below. We've got your sway bar right here. We're going to disconnect the sway bar. We're going to go ahead and do that on both sides of the car. We're going to go ahead, and take this line out of the clip because that's attached to your strut right now. Don't forget to put this guy back when you're all finished. And then we're going to disconnect the upper control arm. And the way you do this is you basically remove this little pinch screw. So as you can see, there's a Torx bit here. That's going to help you to be able to twist and turn that to help work that out of there. I know that was the most difficult part of doing that on the M6. That can be a little bit difficult, or it might be really easy, but that's how you get those apart. And then the spindle should be ready to drop down. We'll see what happens after that. All right, once you get to the upper control arm part and you loosen this guy, you will have to tap it out. Don't worry, it will be okay to actually tap that out. I apologize about my focus, but it's just not wanting to play ball today. But anyways, you tap that guy out. Luckily, this thing just came springing right out of here, so I didn't have to go twisting on that. That was very difficult on the last car that I did, so you never know. Sometimes you catch a break. All right, so here's where things differ from most of the other cars that I work on. I don't normally work on all-wheel drive cars. So obviously this has got a axle up front, and you've got this weird wishbone deal thing here or whatever. Anyways, we've got to get all of this out of there. So what I'm going to attempt to do is decouple the shock from this area here, which means I'm gonna have to take the bolt out here, and there's no nut on the other side of that, so the bolt should come right out. And then I'm gonna tap on this guy until the shock comes out of it, and that should drop the spindle all the way down. So here we go. I went ahead and unbolted the bottom of the strut from the control arm just to give this thing a little bit more wiggle room. And what we're gonna do is basically just tap on this thing until we can get this collar or whatever you want it to come off. That's going to allow us the clearance to actually pull the shock out from where it currently resides. All right, now we've got that little wishbone out. As you can see, the actual strut and shock is hanging freely in here, and we're gonna go ahead and start pulling out the top screws. These are not like most cars, it's the same as the M6, but everything else usually has studs that come up. This actually has bolts that go down into the shock. So I'm gonna pull this last one out. I'm not gonna be able to hold the camera while I do that, and then the shock will be out of there. Okay, in order to take apart your strut, you're gonna need an 18mm open-end ratchet. That's gonna make your life very easy. You're also gonna need a 10mm ratchet, and that's gonna go right here on top of the strut. That's gonna hold that in place so that the strut shaft, or whatever you wanna call that, won't spin while you're unloosing it. Do not use impact tools on this. There's warnings that impact tools will damage that. So basically, you get your tools going together like that, and you'll be able to unloosen that nut. Don't worry about spring compressors or anything like that. Just carefully remove it. There's not enough pressure on that spring for it to fly off of there and cause any kind of damages or anything like that. These springs on this particular car are not under a tremendous amount of pressure. Once you've removed the nut, just take note, mental note of the orientation of everything. The nut comes off, the boot and top hat comes off, and that's going to expose the shaft, and the spring will be loose at this point. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull our spring off, taking note of the orientation and the rotation of the spring, because most of the time these springs do have a particular side that they're supposed to go on. We're going to leave our spring boot in place. Alright, we're going to grab ourselves a new spring, and it's always a good idea to compare parts that you take off to the new parts, just so that you know what they look like before you put them back on. We're going to put the, if you take a look at the springs, kind of scrunched up here and it's longer apart here. Also, you can tell that the writing is up, so that's how you know which way to put it. And so the smaller end, so the tighter end is going to go up top, and I think this end might actually be smaller diameter anyway, so we're gonna put this on there. And I don't know. Dead giveaway is if things don't feel right when you put it back together, either you have a cheap kit or you're doing it wrong. So there's the new spring on. And we're gonna go ahead, grab our top hat, slide that back on, taking care to clock this properly and line that up to the end of the spring, which you got there. Alright, so from here we're just going to be working in reverse of what we've already done, getting everything put back in place, and that'll be it for the fronts. Alright folks, now we're on to the rears. So as you can see, we've got a very easy disconnection down here at the bottom. There's only one single bolt holding the strut to the control arm assembly, and then of course up top you've got your 3 bolts which hold it up top. The unfortunate part and the very fun part, and by very fun I mean I'm probably going to regret taking this job on, is that on the M5, in order to get to that rear shock top hat, you actually have to come inside the rear. You've got to take all of this apart, and then you got to go up in the rear deck and remove the rear speakers, and that's the only way you can unbolt the rear shocks. Alright folks, so I spent about a half hour taking apart the trunk, and unfortunately I did not find what I was hoping to find. So I'm in here taking apart the rear deck lid. I've gotten things down as far as I think they need to go. So first of all, the rear deck lid does not come out, but it does get pretty loose. So in order to get to the point that you see where I'm at now, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it for you because I've already ripped everything apart. The first thing you're going to have to do is when you open the door, your back doors, you have these side panels that go down right here. You simply get your hand behind those and you pull on them. They will come out. It doesn't take a whole lot of force, but that's the only way they come out. You pull them until they come out. That's going to expose all of these wires here. The next thing that you're going to see is across your rear deck lid, you got these holes here. Those are little plastic pop rivet thingies, removable clip things. You pull all 3 of those out, and then you can start to pull your rear deck lid out. The next thing, you've got these corner trims that your seat belt is going through that live up in the corner. Once again, those take a little bit more force to pull out, but the way they come out is you just have to pull on them. They'll come straight out towards you, and then you can just slide them down the seat belt. Once you pull all of that stuff off of both sides, you can start to lift your rear deck lid. So there's no taking the speakers out in this one. They stay with the deck lid, but you can actually lift that up. Once you have space to get in there, you actually have to pull out the seatbelt spool. And I don't want to lift this up and show you all of it because I just don't want the seatbelt to retract itself and get stuck potentially. But basically, there is a T15 Torx. You're not going to be able to see it, but it's right behind where the seatbelt, basically it holds the seatbelt in place, and it's right here. You're not going to be able to see it unless you like shove your head underneath the rear deck. So you pull that T15 Torx out. You're gonna have to jam your hand back there with a ratchet and get that out. Really helps if you have a motorized ratchet. And then there's a little tiny Torx right here. I don't know the size, but it's a small one that's easy to come out. Once that's out, the seatbelt spool will be loose. Then from there, you can lift up your rear deck. You can lift up this rubber padding, and you can see right here where I'm touching, that's one of the screws, and you can kind of see a circular pattern back here, and there's 3 screws and they go around that pattern. But basically, once you're able to lift this stuff up, see there's the kind of circular pattern right there that I'm pointing to with my pinky. There's 3 screws in there, and you'll be able to hit that. Once again, you're going to want to have a motorized ratchet. You don't need one, but that's what's going to make my life easier during this. The electronic portion of that strut is actually plugged in from the bottom. In earlier cars, it actually comes out from the top and it goes down this area here. But in the other one, in this car, it plugs in from the bottom, so we don't have to unplug that first. So we're going to go ahead and undo those 3 screws. Then we're going to undo the bottom screw. We're going to let it strut down, and then we're going to unplug it. Also, one other tip, when you're pulling the seatbelt out, Also, one other tip, when you're unsecuring the seatbelt, or basically unbolting the seatbelt, before you do that, pull the seatbelt out as far as you can pull it out and secure it with something to keep it from retracting, because basically once this is no longer level, it locks into place and it's going to keep retracting. And the only way you can get the seatbelt to unretract is if you get it perfectly level the way it's supposed to sit. But if you get it bound up all the way to the point where it's tight, you're not going to be able to level it, and then you're going to be in a bind, literally. So make sure you just fully pull it out as far as you can while you disconnect it, and then leave it that way until you reconnect it. All right, we've got the rear strut out. Like I said, at the bottom it's just held in by one 18mm long bolt, and you kind of have to tap on a little bit because this kind of seats inside of the control arm area. It's going to be the same process to replace the spring on this one. The only difference is I needed a deep socket 10mm, just because it's a little bit different back here, so this one doesn't reach. So make sure you have yourself a good pass-through socket set, and I'm just going to go ahead and make a recommendation. I chopped off the brand name on this one, but actually I'm just going to go ahead and make a recommendation. Buy this set. It's by Crescent. I believe you can get it on Amazon. This is the best pass-through set that I've had. I think I've had like 3 different pass-through sets, and they've all been very disappointing for me to use. This one is great because it's also a wrench, and it's got a ratchet on the back of it. And it's really exciting every time I get to use this thing. Anyways, this is a really good pass-through set, and it's a really nice wrench also. So definitely get yourself one of those to put on hand. Also, all of the sockets are universal, which means they're metric and standard. So you actually get a lot of utility out of that kit right there. So there's my little commercial on the Crescent socket set. We're gonna go ahead, pull this apart, and place the spring. All right, we've got the new spring mounted, and it's time for this to go back in the car. On this particular model, make sure you take note of how your top hat is oriented. This one here has this notch, and I remember it was slightly offset from the bottom. I know I'm gonna have to turn it to dial it in a little bit more, but these 3 prongs are not evenly spaced, and if you try to put it in the wrong way, like you'll get one hole lined up and the other 2 won't be there, and it's gonna be really frustrating. So this job, putting this spring back in, or putting this strut back in, is already like the most difficult thing that you have to do in this entire job. Make sure you're at least putting it in the right way. Also make sure you reconnect your plugs, because if you don't, you're going to get a suspension error. So pretty much from this point on, you're just putting everything in reverse. Alright folks, so this is a view inside the fender well, and after a very, very long fight of trying to put the strut back in, just by feel, which is basically impossible, my wife casually pointed out to me that I could pull the fender liner down. Sorry for being so close, but I'm in a really tight space right now. But basically, there's a few 10mm bolts, plastic bolts, and you can pull the fender liner down, and then you can see right up to the shock tower, and that's the only way you're going to be able to bolt this thing back in. So go ahead and pull that fender liner down. You don't have to pull it all the way out, and then you can get this thing back in there. Definitely looks lower. It's not super low, but it's got a nice drop to it. Yeah, it's definitely lower. Really wish I could see this thing in the daylight. Alright folks, so there you have it. It's lowered. I'm going to have Dershawn send me pictures of this thing that I'm going to put in the video. I really wish that I had taken measurements beforehand to see what we dropped to, but I just got excited about the M8 and I just dug into it. But it's definitely lower. We've eliminated most of the fender gap. I think it went from like 3 fingers to like 1 finger. So that's the install on the F93, I think, BMW M8. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Normally I wouldn't ask for like and subscribe, but if this video did help you, please like the video, because that makes the video easier for other people to find. So don't do it for me, do it for other folks if it helped you out. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.